and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
The Israel-Hamas war. Stay with CBS News for continuing coverage.
I think it has been awful, and not just from the president, but also from all those around him.
I would support President Trump.
Would you be willing to serve in a Trump cabinet?
In the right position.
What you hear from so many people is, why would we deal with other people's national security and ignore American national security?
Hello, I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. A new CBS News poll is showing us what Americans think now about the economy and the war in the Middle East, with major implications for 2024. Just 38% approve of President Biden's handling of the economy, and most Americans also say the condition of the economy is bad, despite recent positive economic news. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now to break it down. Hey, Anthony, how are you?
Hey, Nancy, good to talk to you.
Yeah, so the Biden administration is saying unemployment is down, wages are up, inflation is way down, but you found that many Americans simply still feel lousy about inflation.
Yeah, simplest answer is usually best, so look at this. Is your income keeping pace with inflation? And 3/4 say no, it's not. So while those national job numbers, which people say are good, are there, while the rate of inflation is slowing, the prices they're paying for goods are still high. And so that's how you get here, that they don't feel like they're able to keep up. Now, I'll add this. When the White House talks about those national numbers, we asked, you and I have talked about this, what is it that people weigh when they evaluate them? Well, the national data, okay, 2/3 of people say they look at that. But look how much higher they rate their own experiences, people that they know, what's happening to them, and businesses in their community. That's the close, that's the personal, and that's what goes into these metrics even more, Nancy.
And certainly if you're looking to get a car loan or a mortgage, you don't feel like things are getting better. Anthony, what are Americans saying about their chances of getting ahead in this economy?
Yeah, that's so important, and it's something that we found in the poll is really stands out, especially for people in their key earning years, Gen Xers, millennials. They feel like their standard of living is worse than their parents' was at this same time in their lives. That runs a little counter to what we traditionally think of as the American dream, right? That you're going to be better off. And that's really a function coming out of the pandemic. We've seen people compare the way things were pre-pandemic and then afterwards. And in this poll, people tell us they feel like what the economy went through during the pandemic, during the shutdowns, and then this inflationary period afterwards has really left a mark, and it's still lingering in how people feel and how they compare to their past, to the past before that pandemic.
Right. And so if the White House is hoping that people's attitudes about the economy are going to change, they're going to have to wait a little longer. You also took a look, Anthony, at how Americans are feeling about the Israel-Hamas war, and that's fascinating. What did they say?
I did. Start with this, because people start with results when they make these evaluations. You get this bulk of people saying the administration isn't having an impact in bringing the conflict to a peaceful resolution. After that, his handling overall has gone down. But I would also point out this, Nancy. Within the Democratic Party, we talked about some divisions there. We've got an increase from 28 to 38 in the number of Democrats who feel like Biden is showing too much support for Israel. I want to keep an eye on that because, of course, for any president, having that unified party behind them in their approach to foreign policy, always critical, Nancy.
Yeah, it really demonstrates the shifting opinions about this conflict and about Israel and the Palestinians. Anthony Salvanto, thanks so much.
Thank you.
President Biden's unwavering support for Israel could also cost him some support in the important swing state of Michigan. CBS's Ed O'Keefe spoke with Arab Americans there about the president's re-election bid.
You voted against Donald Trump in 2020.
Yes.
You would skip voting for President in 2024,
yes,
even if it meant Donald Trump might win the presidency?
if you were to tell me that my vote would be the vote whether Biden wins in Michigan or not, I will still not vote for Biden.
It's that much of an issue for you?
Yeah, my people dying is that much of an issue for me.
Well, Ed O'Keefe and Bo Erickson join us now. Ed is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent. Bo is a CBS News White House reporter. Good to have you both here. It's a White House reunion.
It is.
And Ed, I'm going to start with you because that was a really fascinating clip that you played. Arab Americans make up, I think, about 3% of the population in Michigan, but they went overwhelmingly for President Biden in 2020. And so a loss of this group, among this group in 2024, could cost him in a swing state.
It could. Consider this. The president won Michigan in 2020 by about 150,000 votes. About 146,000 Muslims living in Michigan voted in 2020. So that right there, if conceivably, as Adam told us, most of his neighborhood, many of his friends were to stay home or at least leave that question on the ballot blank, could be robbing the president of the margins he needs to win. And that's what's so concerning to either side of this is if you're looking at a turnout game in November next year, you have to turn out everyone you possibly can find. Right now, this group of voters in a key swing state is telling the Biden campaign, stay away. Donald Trump was bad because he supported the Muslim travel ban, said a lot of derogatory things about Arab or Muslim Americans. But President Biden is supporting an Israeli government that is killing tens of thousands of their neighbors, their friends, their relatives, and they can't stand for it.
And the White House has made sure to emphasize, especially recently, all the humanitarian aid they're providing to the Palestinians in Gaza. But it sounds like that may not be quite enough to sway this group. Bo, you were in Las Vegas Friday and over the weekend covering the president there, and you spoke to some voters. What did they have to tell you?
So the president has been holding a lot of events at union halls. It really kind of revs up the crowd. There's kind of built-in audience for the president. And then this allows the president kind of talk about his middle-class credibility. And I was asking a lot of the voters there how they thought the economy was doing, and we can listen to some of that sound.
My family, like every other family, has had to pinch pennies to adapt to the rising prices. But at the same time, I know that the employment numbers have been strong, and so there's always a flip side of the coin.
Yesterday, I was stopped in the grocery store because mayonnaise was $7, and it was hard for me not to say a lot of this is because of corporate greed.
So those may be Vegas prices for the mayonnaise.
$7 for mayonnaise. Wow.
But I think these are Democratic voters. They supported President Biden in 2020, and they're kind of hinting on some of this pressure that they're under. And that woman, her name is Margie, she kind of underscored the current political calculus, I think, when it comes to a lot of these Democratic voters. She's thinking next November, she said, whether Democrats are mad at Joe Biden, they're going to be more mad at Donald Trump. And even if they have to hold their nose, they're going to support Joe Biden. She's a local Democrat activist, so she's still feeling confident.
Is that what the White House is banking on?
It
that
is.
These voters will come home at the end of the day?
It is, and it's why I kind of am intrigued by that is that Adam, who you saw there earlier, had said to me, if you asked me 2 months ago before the conflict began what I would do, he said, I will, quote, hold my nose and vote for Joe Biden because he's not happy about the economy. Now, of course, he's got that other issue. So what the Biden campaign's trying to do, they've rolled out about a $25 million TV ad campaign, at least initially in the swing states. Most of those ads focused on the economy, most of them starring what we would call real people, not the president or the vice president, but people talking about how prices lower for insulin or for their prescription drugs have helped them and their bottom lines. That speaks to something we found in the poll, which is about 8 in 10 plus Americans say the way they're measuring economic health and viability right now is from personal experience or what is happening to their spouse or their neighbors or their friends, not economic data like a lower unemployment rate and declining inflation, which is what the White House is constantly talking about. So they realize they've got to make a more personal connection with these voters to win them back.
It's a lagging indicator. Bo, you had some really interesting reporting today about the Biden campaign's fundraising efforts. What can you tell us?
So looking under kind of the hood of this fundraising machine, there is some concern by top donors who are saying that the White House and the president hasn't really been engaged to the level that they should have been the past 3 years. And so one donor was telling me now that it's go time, the campaign is like, where is everybody at? So I asked the Biden campaign about this, and they said this may be a little bit more isolated criticism. And they point to the $72 million and the $71 million that the president has raised in the past 6 months. He's doing a lot of fundraising this week. He's been to 36 fundraisers since relaunching his campaign in April.
Wow, that's really interesting. Clearly, they've got some work to do winning over some of these donors. Let's listen in really quickly to the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan.
If you face the binary choice of reelecting the president or reelecting the former president, who had implemented Muslim bans and who has said and done all sorts of things detrimental to the Arab and Muslim American communities, what do you do?
Well, you have an issue where you have both individuals with blood on their hands. You know, I often have said that the domestic policies that President Biden has achieved have been nothing short of phenomenal, whether it was the American Rescue Plan Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, and we're seeing that difference on the ground. However, you cannot overlook the genocide that's taken place, and you have to weigh that on a scale.
So that was actually part of our conversation in Dearborn with the mayor, first Arab American mayor of a city that is predominantly Arab American. And he said, look, on the economy, we can't complain here. We're getting tens of millions of dollars in federal aid. It's just that a predominant part of this city now is so personally tied to and concerned about the conflict. You can't necessarily count on us next November. And again, that's part of the problem they're going to face, battleground state by battleground state, either single-issue voters or people concerned about the economy.
Issue number one for them, for sure. Ed O'Keefe, Bo Erickson, thanks so much. Special counsel Jack Smith has requested a Supreme Court ruling on former President Donald Trump's claim of criminal immunity in his federal election subversion case. The federal trial is set to begin March 4th and cannot proceed while Trump appeals the judge's rejection of his immunity argument. In Monday's filing, Smith says a quick ruling from the high court is necessary to ensure that the case is not delayed past the 2024 election. That's what he did not say out loud. Former President Trump is also facing a civil trial in New York where he is choosing not to take the stand as scheduled. We'll explain how his base is reacting to that. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
Welcome back to America Decides. Former President Donald Trump has opted not to testify as scheduled in his New York civil fraud trial. The last-minute decision comes as a new Des Moines Register poll shows him far ahead of other GOP candidates in Iowa. 51% of Iowa voters now support the former president as the nominee, while 19% support Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and 16% support former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now to discuss all of this. Hey, Robert.
Great to be with you, Nancy.
So every 4 years, we wait with great anticipation for this Des Moines Register Iowa poll. It is the gold standard. What stuck out to you from that poll?
Trump's lead. For these Trump rivals, the question is, where do they go from here? How do they actually start to get traction in the closing weeks? If you're someone like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, you already have Governor Kim Reynolds' endorsement. You've built this 99-county tour across the state, and you're still struggling to really have a credible second place in the polls. Now, anything can happen. Iowa often closes late. You don't want to read too much into this poll, though this is the most reputable poll in Iowa, other than anything from CBS News.
Oh, of course.
But this is an indication of where the Republican Party's, the non-Trump wing's, really in a tough spot.
Yeah. Over the weekend, the president spoke to a young Republicans group in New York. He again said he wants to be dictator, but just for one day if reelected. He talked about how the country is in hell right now. How are his comments going over with that group and with his base more broadly?
He has made incendiary comments for years, so there's sometimes a tendency from even Trump critics to look aside and to say these comments are just Trump being Trump. Senator Mitt Romney said over the weekend that Trump's like a gumball machine. He just kind of says anything and thinks anything and it comes out. But as a reporter who's covered Trump going back to 2011, I believe you have to take what he says seriously, maybe not in terms of the literal definition of wanting to be a dictator, but he is saying publicly he wants to use executive power in a sweeping and aggressive fashion should he win the White House again. And having covered him during those final days in 2020 and 2021, he is so comfortable with power now and understanding where power lives in the federal government that you can't just say, oh, this is Trump being Trump. This is Trump looking ahead to a possible presidency.
And he is clearly aware of the accusations that have been made against him, that he is leaning towards fascism. And obviously, by saying he wants to be dictator for a day, he's basically saying he doesn't care.
And I asked former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy about this in a Sunday morning conversation over the weekend. And I said, what do you say, Mr. Former Speaker, to those who look at Trump and see a fascist on the horizon? They see an authoritarian. He says, oh, I don't see that. And I said, well, he's talking about retribution all the time on the campaign trail. McCarthy said he should stop that. And I said, well, who's to say he's going to listen to you or any other top-ranking Republican? He hasn't done so far on almost anything.
That was a really fascinating interview. You asked the former speaker why he's leaving early, what he plans to do next. Let's take a listen to some of that conversation.
Will you run again for office?
I might, but it won't be in Congress.
For governor? President?
I don't know what, but I love the ability to help. I love the ability of being a part of a solution. I love the challenge. You know, if I was to quit, why wouldn't I quit back 8 years ago when I stumbled? Why wouldn't I have quitted 5 years ago when we're in the minority and you have no choice? When everybody said Republicans couldn't do that. My first election cycle as leader, I become leader. Nancy Pelosi comes speaker. We're both from California. And you know, in those 5 years, How many seats did Nancy Pelosi win in California? None. She lost 5. It was the first time since 1990 Republicans actually flipped Democrat seats.
All politics is local, isn't it? To use the Tip O'Neill phrase. Even as he leaves, he's still competing with his fellow Californian.
What did you find most interesting about that conversation?
He said he's willing to serve in a cabinet should Trump win again. He offered Trump as an endorsement. He had not offered Trump a formal endorsement until our conversation. And so you see in McCarthy a prism into the Republican Party right now. So many have concerns about him in terms of Trump's conduct, his ability to be a president who's thinking about democracy, who's thinking about a stable country. At the same time, they're ready to support him because they don't see any other option. You began this discussion by looking at that Iowa poll. They look at polls like that, Kevin McCarthy and others, and they say, no one's catching up, so we're going to get on the Trump train. And I, as a reporter, all you can do is say, do you think about the consequences of what that could mean? He's certainly been through a lot of ups and downs with former President Trump. It was a great get and a really interesting interview. Thanks, Nancy.
Bob Costa, thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Hunter Biden is moving to dismiss his felony gun charges. An attorney for the president's son argues the charges are unconstitutional. Earlier this year, Hunter Biden was indicted by a federal grand jury on charges related to his purchase of a firearm in 2018. He also faces 9 counts of tax crimes. Congress is running out of time to pass an aid package for Ukraine and Israel. Next, we're going to ask our political panel what needs to happen in order for Congress to get the job done. You're streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happierness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme, CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Politics isn't a game.
Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard?
Politics is about policy.
Was this the right way to actually get this done?
I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. I think I'm more interested in the answer than in the wind-up. It's not about me, it's about the issue.
How will you handle that?
When I became moderator of Face the Nation, I was very aware of not changing the heritage of the show.
Why did you miss the moment?
I started my career covering Wall Street. I did it for a decade. I traveled around the world with secretaries of state, defense, with presidents. I am a journalist, mother, the wife of a Marine, and frankly, someone who wants answers.
So do you think there is a communication problem here?
To be moderator of Face the Nation is not an anchor, it's not an actress. You are up here to moderate a conversation. That means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
Can you get Ukraine aid passed separate from this?
No. The focus is, we hear from so many people, is why would we deal with other people's national security and ignore American national security?
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford standing firm on the GOP position that funding for Israel and Ukraine needs to be tied to border policy changes. Ukrainian President Zelensky will try to put his thumb on the scale tomorrow when he meets with congressional leaders in Washington. Joel Payne and Maura Gillespie join us now. Joel is a CBS News political contributor, Democratic strategist, and chief communications officer for Move On, while Maura previously served as an advisor to Speaker John Boehner and Congressman Adam Kinzinger. She is now the founder of Blue Stack Strategies. Welcome to you both.
Good to be with you.
So let's start out with Ukraine and border security. Maura, Republicans are saying these two have to be tied together. It's very difficult to get a sense of how close negotiators are at this point because they don't want to tell us where they stand right now on things like asylum, humanitarian parole. What we do know is that Congress has an abysmal track record when it comes to negotiating border security or immigration deals and then getting it passed.
And part of that reason is they don't want to tell the constituents at home what they're thinking, what they're planning, because immigration, border security has long been a wedge issue for both sides of the aisle.
Right.
So it's, again, and thinking about polls and how they're, relaying themselves to voters, they don't want to share that yet. And I think that for us, as we're sitting here wondering how they're going to flesh this out, it doesn't seem like it's possible.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, they're not really looking at the full picture when it comes to our foreign policy and how we need to support our allies because of the impacts it does have on us here at home and our safety and security. The correlation is very much there, but unfortunately for the Republican Party, it's just not really making that connection, which again is a very big step back from where I joined as a Republican. We were always the foreign policy pro our allies, and so now it's interesting that the change of tone for sure.
Joel, it's always darkest before the dawn. They could come out and magically have a deal sometime this week. But how far do you think Democrats are really willing to go when it comes to border policy when path to citizenship is not part of this deal, legalization for the Dreamers also not part of this deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think because the president has actually come out and been very bullish and said, I want to do something on the border, that kind of tells you, I think, what Democrats are willing to do which is they're willing to go further maybe than they typically would in terms of border security. Also, look, I'm a Senate kid. You're a House person. These folks need deadlines, and I think we're running up across some deadlines right now. I think they'll get something done. One, because you've heard Democrats say they're willing to do something on the border, and I do think that most Republicans probably still want to do something on Israel for sure, and I think there's probably a quiet majority that want to do something on Ukraine as well, even if the politics don't allow for it right now.
Politically, the president needs to do something when it comes to border security, right? Yeah,
for sure. I think particularly in this election season. But, honestly, the president, he's facing some pressure within his party. You've heard Democrats like John Fetterman talk about the changing politics on immigration. I think it is incumbent upon Democrats to find a way to be both thoughtful on immigration, but also be impactful, to not put out something on immigration that's going to go against their values, that's going to go against what people think of as some of the moral concerns related to migration, but also that kind of, meets the moment right now.
Maura, the president has already cut one deal with Republicans and got burned. It was on the debt. He cut this very high-profile deal with the House Speaker, who is no longer the House Speaker. Correct, yes. He got ejected because his right flank thought that it didn't go far enough, and they basically abandoned that deal. If the president now steps forward and cuts a deal with Senate Republicans on border security, what guarantees does he have that House Republicans aren't going to reject it again because they, again, don't feel like it goes far enough?
And that, we've seen that before. When I worked for John Boehner, people in the party constantly moved the goalpost on us, despite doing all we could to get an agreement that was viable.
On this issue in particular.
So I understand those concerns and those frustrations, but when you look at the economy as number one issue, that's on people's minds. Number two is security and safety. So it has to, the Republicans will be able to push the president to get more of what they want in this scenario. And they're going to have to just get on board with it, truthfully, because the American people are genuinely deeply concerned about safety and security. It's across the country. It's an issue.
And you hear even the most conservative Republicans saying on the House floor, we haven't gotten anything done. We don't have anything to show for our control of the House. So they're looking for something that they can take back to their voters in 2024 as well, which symbolizes the fact that there is this potentially important moment where both sides have a lot to gain from compromising on this intractable issue.
Nancy, I think Republicans feel like they've gotten rolled on a couple of deals here recently, and I think there's pressure on Mike Johnson. I think there's pressure on Mitch McConnell to demonstrate to their base, not just their base outside of D.C., but their base inside of D.C., that they'll fight for the stuff that Republicans purport to care about. So I think that's why they are putting up a fight, or at least getting caught trying to put up a fight.
I want to play a little bit of sound for you because in Bob Costa's interview with the former House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, he gave a little bit of advice to the new Speaker, Mike Johnson. Let's take a listen.
The best advice I could give to him, you're the Speaker of the House. Do not govern in the idea that you're afraid somebody's going to make a motion to vacate. When I made the decision to pay our troops and not shut down, I knew they were going to make a motion to vacate on me.
Samora, he's saying you just got to do what's right no matter what the consequences are.
Well, it's nice to hear that now, but where was that, time and time again when Kevin McCarthy failed to do so for what was right and necessary to protect our democracy? So I don't quite really have a lot of sympathy there for that. And again, it's fun to take the moral high ground when you're standing back and you're no longer part of the actual consequences of your actions. But Mike Johnson's going to be in the same position, but also Kevin McCarthy put him in this position by not changing the threshold for ousting the Speaker of the House.
Don't make a deal to do motion to vacate with one vote.
That's a good advice. That probably McCarthy himself, which is that he had taken months ago. Joel Payne, Maura Gillespie, thank you both so much. Appreciate it. Well, that does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News. Have a good one.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding